Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm gonna knock out a short video today. I thought I'd document the process on making some false tread end caps. Now typically, I actually just did a video on how to install false tread end caps that you would buy pre-manufactured in a kit like this. So I'll link that video up above, you can check that out. But on this video, I'm going to be making some contemporary end caps. And the one you see here you can purchase it from LJ Smith. It comes in a kit like this, all done, you know, very pretty, 1 3/4 nosing all around, slightly eased edges. I call this a craftsman style or contemporary style end cap. And then it also comes with your piece for the riser. However, on my current job coming up, I have, I'm needing some white oak end caps, and we're in the middle of the coronavirus, so getting stuff is a major issue with a lot of different states shutting down and whatnot. So I decided, rather than have these custom made from a vendor, I'm gonna make them myself. So got my 1/2 inch white oak plywood, and I'm running it through my router table. As you can see here, I got my whole stack, and then I milled some nosing with my dado, and we're gonna assemble all these just like so. So kind of gonna give you a run through on what I'm doing here. Whenever I'm doing stairs, my material vendor always sends out the exact number of end caps that I need. So if I ever have an extra one, a lot of times I'll stash that away and keep it in the shop, because odds are at some point I'm gonna screw one of them up and cut it wrong, and I'm gonna need an extra right away. So it's nice to keep 1 or 2 on hand in the shop. In this case, I had one here, so I'm actually just copying the design on what LJ Smith did with their end cap as far as the tongue and groove design of it. Now what you see here is my router table setup. I don't use a router table a ton, but whenever I do, it does come in super handy. This is almost all Incra stuff, Incra lift, Incra fence, Incra top, cart setup. It's got a 3 horsepower or more Porter cable router dropped in there. And then I custom built all these drawers for my router accessories. And then underneath here, it's a little bit messy in there right now, but it's got the dust containment area that would work a lot better if the cover was on it, but it's not apparently. Anyways, then good dust collection hooked up on it. This is an extremely precise router setup. I like it a lot. I'll link to the various components of this in the notes below, or I'll try and pin it in the very top comment in the comment section. So the first step of this operation was to rip all these pieces same size, and then I have a Freud tongue and groove bit set up. Real simple setup. You can make doors and do all kinds of stuff with this. I will link that in the notes below also. But I've got this set up to run these face down. So all I do is I run them through on the end, turn them, and do one of the other sides. And that gives me my, my tongue that works really well. So I had really good success running these. I'm very happy with how they turned out. Very crisp, and they're fitting into this dado really nice. As you can see right here, I copied what LJ Smith did with theirs, and I went a little bit fatter. Whenever I ran my dado up here, that way there'd be less chance of this piece breaking off, and just caught a little bit of this bottom edge on the plywood. As you can see here, see I've just got a little bit down here, but I've got a lot more meat up here, that way that doesn't break off on my nosing whenever I go to install that. So that seems to work pretty well. Next, I'll turn you around over here from the router table to my table saw, and I went ahead and ran all my nosing pieces with a dado blade. So now here I've got my Freud dial-a-width dado stack set up at about 1/4 inch to run these dados. Now I ripped all these out of 1x6, ran them through, I ripped them in half, ran them through the joiner to get them nice and straight, and then ripped them again, about a 1/16 over, and then finished them off on the planer, taking another 1/16 off, which is going to give me a nice glass finish on both sides. So these are good to go to be ran. Now, lengthwise, I cut them down enough that they'd be manageable so that as I'm pushing these through, I can get really nice, consistent pressure. Whenever you're working with Dados, your worst enemy is if the piece inadvertently lifts up, because then your dado is not going to be at full depth, and you go to try to put that tongue in there and your pieces are not going to come together well. So as I was running these, I sight them, and like this piece has quite a bow in it. So whenever I run it, I want to make sure I've got that bow face down. That way, as I'm running it through on this bit, I can rock it and keep constant pressure with the piece tight at this contact point the whole way through. Now, if I wasn't paying attention with this bow and I would have ran it through like this, I would have had to put a ton of pressure on the workpiece as I'm pushing it through, which creates a ton of issues, not only from safety, but also from practically milling it. And this being white oak, it's not gonna wanna give a whole lot. So I recommend cutting pieces that are manageable size to kind of help you mitigate those issues that you're gonna get from bowed pieces. So then running these through is pretty simple. Your fingers are not really in danger after you've got your cut started, because the blade is completely covered by the workpiece. So this might freak a lot of people out, but as I'm running it through, my hands will be right over the top of the blade. You know, some people might not like that, but again, in this instance, your hand is completely protected by the workpiece. So I'll just push that through, making sure I've got really consistent pressure the whole way. And then as I get to the end, that's where you want to use your push stick, because if you're going to get your fingers, it's more than likely going to be at the end. If you put your finger down here and try to push this through, you're just opening up the possibility of an accident. So after I get most of the way, I'll use my push stick and then finish it off. This push stick has a little domino installed on the back, and that's sacrificial, so that's what's catching it and pushing it through. All right, guys, so I actually just took a lunch break. I glued up half of these before lunch, and as you can see, it's pretty simple, just putting some glue on things and then throwing a couple clamps on it. So I've got 24 total. I did 12 here. I'm gonna take the clamps off all of these and then glue up the other half. So I'll give you a little bit of a close-up on what I'm doing there right now. So a few notes on gluing these up. So here's a glued up piece. Imagine the stair is coming down. This side is my outside of the stair, and then inside right here is where my carpet will be, and it'll butt up to this 1/2-inch plywood. So all I actually need is the piece of 1x nosing across the front and then the side. And then whenever I'm assembling the stair on site, I'll actually end up making this miter cut right here again on this piece of nosing, along with my straight cut across here at whatever measurement I need. But I've made these plenty long to work for any situation I might run into. So none of this matters on the back right here. The main thing is just to make sure it's long enough, because again, this is gonna get recut, and then this will also be recut on site whenever I'm installing them. Now, you won't be able to see this, but I made my dado on my nosing so that this is just a hair proud of the plywood, and you'll see in a little bit, I'll flush trim that off and then sand this really nice. But you don't want to be going for flush right here, because if you get too low, it's going to be a bad deal. I'd rather go a hair proud and then flush trim it, and then it'll be perfect. So we'll get started gluing more of these up. Getting started here, I like to take my two pieces and I like to assemble the nosing first. Now you'll notice on this long piece, just so I didn't mess myself up, I actually put a miter on both ends. So make sure your dado is on top, Gonna go ahead and spread some glue on here, both sides. I smooth it out with my finger because I'm OCD like that. Get a nice even coat there, worked into the grain. Then I will take my 23 gauge pin nailer. Be careful that you don't nail into the dado up here. You want to make sure you're not putting a pin nail in that. Okay, so nailing the nosing first makes a lot of sense because it's going to make sure that this is perfect. Whereas if you're trying to put one piece on, it's just not going to work good. So anyways, moving on, take my glue. I like to hit a nice light coat on both sides of the dado. And this dado is decently tight, so that'll make us make it a lot stronger than if it's loose. So then I put just a light bead on the top here. I'll take my finger, smooth that out, and then I'll insert the plywood piece into the dado. Press down on that, wipe away any excess glue that might have squeezed out. In the back we're good. And it's pretty simple. Just take a couple clamps. Again, you might see a little bit of squeeze out. Here I'm actually gonna change this up and go right there because it's better. Wipe any squeeze out again. And you just want to be eyeballing it, your joint all the way to make sure you're getting it nice and tight. Add a clamp where you need it. If you don't need a clamp, you don't need a clamp. But anyways, this is nice and tight in there, so glue up's pretty simple. We'll set this aside and keep working through these. Alright guys, so while batch number 2 was drying on the clamps, I went ahead and completed batch number 1. Got my clamps off of batch number 2 now, and they're all put away back here. So, show you what I've got going on. The first step, again, like I mentioned before, on these unfinished pieces, I ran my dado so that my nosing would be a hair proud of my plywood. And you could try and use a sander like this, and this does have a hard pad on it, which really helps keep things flat whenever you're sanding. But being that it's white oak and it's very hard, even just having this like a 64th proud, I'd still much rather just run my flush trim router over the top of it and get it flat, almost, you know, basically 99%, and then just touch it up with the sander. You'll get better results that way, and you'll have a less likely chance of rounding over the outside edge or digging through the veneer of your plywood using the orbital sander. So that's what I'm about to do next. On these that are finished, you see they came out really nice. Flush routed them, sand them, and then used a 1/16 router bit just to lightly ease the edge on the top and bottom right here. So very, very happy with how those came out, but I'll show you the rest of this process now. I'm going to be using my OF 1010 router set up for flush trimming. I've went over this router before in other videos, but again, this is one of my favorite tools. You'll see I have to move the clamp, but it's not too big a deal. Now that I've got all my pieces flush trimmed with my flush trimming router, it's going to be time to sand everything. I'm going to hit the bottom of the nosing, the face of the nosing, and then the top. With this flush trimming set up on the router, it's basically flush already, so it's really nice whenever it comes time to sanding. You pretty much just make a pass, make sure you remove any glue residue or anything, and then you're good to go. So we'll do all that to all these, hit the nosing with the router, and then these will be all done. Now the last step in this process is going to be to round over my edges slightly with a 1/16 radius bit. This is a white side 1/16 bit with a pilot bushing on it, or bearing, whatever you want to call it. I'll list this. I use this bit on all of my face frames to break the edges. It's always in a router under my bench here. It's one of my favorite bits. Alright guys, so that concludes this video. What you see here is also the riser pieces, which will be painted. These I will rip at a 45.5 degree whenever it's time to install on the skirt board. Otherwise, all these are done. Again, normally I would have purchased these in a kit because that's just more efficient. But because these needed to be white oak, number one, there was a big cost premium on that custom detail versus what would normally be sold being poplar. So I was able to make up for it doing it in the shop because of the price premium there. And then also we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, which has a lot of disruptions with vendors. So there's also a lot of unpredictability as to if or when I would actually be able to get these, being that places were shut down. So encompassing everything, it made a lot more sense for me to take it into my own hands and make these myself. Made sense on the money end, it made sense on the time end, and it gave me another day in the shop to work versus being out on a job site. So can't beat 3 wins, I guess. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. One more thing. On site, whenever you install these, you'll need a return piece. So I do have some extra nosing to make that return piece. So I'll take all of this with me on site also. But I think that's about it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my other stair videos. I've got some other stair videos doing the traditional style end caps also that I just recently released. So check those out as well. Thanks again guys, we'll see you.